Power Lunch today. As you know, we do have the Power Lunch series where we bring in vendor information. We talk for about 30 minutes. It's a reduced format style, meant to be oriented, not bulletproof, meant to be more bullet point to give us a quick snip of a certain technology. This time, however, we have Chuck Sackley with us. He is the COO of one of our partners, AppGuard. Chuck actually was an early survivor of the COVID, I don't know what we want to call it, COVID disease, COVID
virus.
Virus. And he has a very interesting story to share with us. What we'll do, the format will be that Chuck will present or talk about his story, and then if you have questions at the end, we'll do a question and answer time. If you have questions, feel free to put those in the comments or the chat area. You can click on that at the bottom of the screen. Put your comments there, and Sheila and Haley and I will be monitoring that, and we can help Chuck with that. So Chuck, don't worry about you having to do that. We'll facilitate that piece for you. Again, the format for this is meant to be relatively informal and conversational. Chuck, just feel free to tell your story, and and we'll go from there. So with that, I will turn it over to Chuck.
All right, very good. Well, welcome everyone. Happy to be here today and part of this Power Lunch. It is very topical. For a while, when my neighborhood found out that I was sick, when my wife alerted them, they walked out and around our house. They didn't want to get anywhere near our house, but since my recovery and since I've donated plasma a couple times, suddenly I'm fairly popular and everybody wants to hear my story. So, and I'm happy to tell it in that it might be useful for any of you or your family as you relate it to them or consider it and how you manage your life and your distancing, your social distancing and all of that. So what I thought I'd do is I'll go through kind of my timeline when it happened, where I think I caught it, what I experienced at the worst of it, how I recovered from it. And then as I look back on it, some of my reactions personally and reactions from a work standpoint and so on, because there has been some interesting developments from that. So our corporate office, our headquarters is in New York City, right in the heart of Manhattan. I live in Dallas, but I have been commuting to Dallas every week. So I would fly in on a Sunday and stay through a Thursday and stay in a hotel 5 or 6 blocks from the office. And so I would trek back and forth, and very busy streets. Any of you that have been in New York, it is like swimming upstream to get to work, and the elevators are packed. So it was a prime opportunity to catch a virus like that. Planes are jam-packed, airports are packed. So on Thursday, March 5th, that was my last day in New York. Doing the math and looking back from that, March 13th and 14th, I started getting the first symptoms. Loss of taste. I was actually out to dinner with friends, and we were at a favorite restaurant, and I couldn't really taste anything, and I was sneezing a fair amount, mild congestion. And then on Sunday the 15th, it started to really set in: headaches, increased congestion, fluid in my lungs, aches now throughout my body. On Monday, March the 16th, I tried to motor through the day. Mondays are kick off the weekdays and staff meetings. So I tried to make it through the day, but halfway through the day, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to take my headset off and put my phone down, and I just crashed in bed. And within a matter of hours, I was running a fairly high fever, never got above 100, 101. but completely lost my appetite. I really became unable to sit up, to drink water. And I kind of started fading in and out of consciousness starting Monday night, the 16th. And then I had three very bad days. My temperature stayed high. I kept coughing. Eventually, I'm blessed, I should say, through this, in that I have a daughter who's 26 living with us. She's an ICU nurse, and she had been trained on COVID treatment. So because she was living with someone who was confirmed to have COVID, she couldn't leave. She was stuck with me. And so she attended to me, and she had the ability to check my blood oxygen level. And I was in the low 80s, which for any of you that are aware of what those numbers are, that's very low. If you're in the low 80s, you're hypoxic and you should be heading to a hospital. So she was checking me every 30, 45 minutes, 24 hours a day for 3 or 4 days. I lost probably 15 pounds in 3 days because I wasn't taking anything in. I couldn't even get up to go to the restroom. Didn't have anything to get rid of. So it worked out pretty well. She eventually forced me to take deep breaths and to cough up the fluid that I had in my lungs. It hurt to do that, but I did it, and it helped to clear my lungs. I did have the nightmares that everyone talks about, very, very deep sleeps and going in and out of consciousness. It was pretty tough. It scared me. I'll tell you the truth. I've had pneumonia before. Any of you that have had pneumonia, really bad case of pneumonia. This is right there with that in terms of how bad you feel and how you can't lift your body up. And I say all this is my experience. I know a lot of other friends and family who had it, have the antibodies and had no symptoms. They asymptomatic. So perhaps I got it as bad as I did because I had pneumonia. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's my blood type. I don't know. But I did take a test. Our local doctor, my wife had been in contact with their office all day, on and off all day throughout this 3 or 4 day period. I finally felt well enough to put on a face mask and sit in the back seat. And then my wife drove me over to his office where they were taking first tests. The nurse came out with all the garb on and took a swab, but she really didn't go very deep, and it went to a lab deep in my nose. It didn't get a good sample, or it was compromised. So it came back as a false negative on my first test. So I went back home and was shocked and disappointed, and struggled through the weekend. And I was feeling better, not well enough to be up and around much, but feeling better, drinking chicken broth and eating some crackers after about 7 days. So we went back for another test. I'm like, if it's not this, then what is it? So we went back for another test, and sure enough, I came back positive. So then, of course, my wife and daughters, I have 3 that are home with us. Everyone was locked down in isolation and couldn't go anywhere for 2 weeks. We didn't want to be in the same rooms, and so I did get a prescription for Z-Pak. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. It's not the strongest antibiotic, but it is a fairly effective antibiotic. And the doctor said take a lot of vitamin C and D, so I doubled up, tripled up on that. I take it pretty regularly. So continue to slowly get better. It's 2 weeks 2.5 weeks from the initial symptoms. Went back for another test and finally tested negative. So I'm feeling better. Finally, it occurred to me that I was moved. It's like I said, it scared me. I was moved in that I should share this with people and I should pass it forward, if you will. And so I decided I wanted to donate plasma. So I went to a lab. They didn't chase me, oddly. I thought they would, right? Because I had to register with the county health department, and they sent me a letter affirming I had it in case I needed to give it to my employer and that kind of thing. But I expected that I would be approached and that they would be asking for plasma, but they didn't. So I called to a couple of blood centers and described who I was, and eventually the information got in the right hands, and one of the local hospitals called me in to run a clinical on me to see if I had sufficient antibodies, right? So at this time, late March, early May, they were feeling as though you may have experienced it, but you had to have a sufficient level of antibodies. So I did, and within a few days, I went for my first plasma donation, where if you haven't done that, what they do is they pull your blood out, run it through a filter, screen off your plasma, about 2 quarts, I think. And then they put your red blood cells and the fluid back in your body. So, and you can do that every 28 days. So I did it again just recently, and I plan to do it as long as they'll continue to take me, because as I talk to the doctors and the nurses at the blood center, there are people who are in intubation that are in a crisis mode, and it's been proven fairly widespread that convalescent plasma does make a significant positive impact on recovery. So, I just feel like it's something that I can do and I should do, and so I have been doing it. So it's been now 2 donations. It's been 10 weeks since I've had it. Reactions that I've had, I wear a mask. I was, my wife and my daughter's very understandably paranoid about me catching it again. She was afraid I might catch it again because there wasn't information on that. So she had rubber gloves and masks in all our vehicles, and we had to put them on. And we've like everyone else, kind of dialed that down. We wear masks now in public mostly, and I don't wear it because I'm afraid of getting sick. I'm afraid of catching the virus and bringing it home to someone in my family, or transmitting it somehow to someone else. So I feel like it's something I need to do out of consideration for friends and family and people in the community. So I do it. A lot of my friends in the area are of the mind, oh, it's just like the flu, and it's not a big deal, and everyone's overreacting, and more people die crossing the street, and so I make an effort to share with them my symptoms and what I went through, so that they understand, at least for me, possibly for them or someone that they care about, it might be more serious. And as I said, I have had extended family that has died from it. I have had friends in New York that have died from it. So place you live, age, all of that comes into play. So I've shared with you kind of my personal reaction to it. It's kind of nice to feel invincible. It's a good thing, right? So I expect I will be given a green card of some type, and I'll be able to travel first and accepted in more offices sooner than most. maybe. From a business standpoint, I got the greatest reaction from my LinkedIn post. If you haven't seen it, go to LinkedIn and you might scan through it. But I had over 4,500, almost 5,000 views. I had several hundred likes and several hundred messages from people that I have known for many years, maybe haven't talked to in 5 or 10 years. Very nice, comments. And I've actually gotten some leads, old friends that are in certain places that are related to my business, cybersecurity, or companies that need cybersecurity. So my efforts to pay it forward have actually paid off in that regard. What I have experienced, I'm sure, more broadly speaking, as I'm sure many of you, initially was when I was up on my feet again, was the initial kind of panic and sense of isolation and agitation and being in captivity. So it was challenging. My family, my daughters are all in their 20s, and they're all home with us because they either live with us or one just graduated from graduate school, or one was working in DC and their office is closed. She figured she might as well come home. So we've got them all home. It was, we were getting in each other's way, but I think we have found a way to find a process that works for us. And so we're looking for silver linings being, we're getting quality time with our kids. We didn't expect to get. From a work standpoint, getting back to that, I don't have to travel, but I am getting access to a lot of executives at companies because they have more time in the day to invest in learning, evaluating, interacting with people, because they don't want to be useless, I guess. They want to be productive. So I've tried to find a way to be effective, and my days are pretty full. I've got calls pretty much all day, every day. So I was laughing with a colleague the other day. I can't wait to get back to normal, so I don't have to work as hard. A little travel, nice meal at a restaurant, have a few laughs. I do the social Zoom calls, and those are good for so long, and then they get a little tedious. So any rate, so that's my story. Hopefully that has been useful for you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have related to the illness or work in the days of COVID or whatever. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you might have.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Chuck. I have a question. When you were hypoxic, or when you first started realizing that your oxygen level was low, were you short of breath? Did you kind of not realize that was the case? It just kind of happened that you're breathing shallower. What happened with that?
Well, quite honestly, I didn't know what hypoxic was. My daughter did. She had, there's a little machine you can put on your finger, it costs $20 maybe. You put it on your finger, and in addition to a thermometer, you should have everyone in their house. There you go. Exactly. You put that on your finger.
I have a stage 4 cancer person living in our home, so we got one of these just to have it.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering what you...
So I could not draw a full breath. My daughter kept pushing me to, take a deep breath. And as I did, it forced me to cough. And I would get lazy and not want to go through the coughing because it got so challenging. So I tried to deal with lower oxygen levels, and maybe that's what caused some of the the weird nightmares and all that, because I was, not getting enough oxygen. I was down and out. When I finally could get up and was still with low oxygen levels, I could not get to the restroom and sit without feeling like I was going to fall over on my face. I was really, really down. As I said, I can't remember being that sick other than when I had pneumonia. Anyone that's had pneumonia, I was hospitalized then. But yeah, any other
Do you
questions?
so when you first found out or figured out
Mhm.
that you were positive, did they do any contact tracing? Did they try to like do lists of people who you had been in contact with? I
No,
mean,
my wife and my daughter did that. My wife was very concerned about
right,
friends
right,
we had had dinner with and whatever. And so she went back, and I sent a note. One of the last things I did is send a note to my office to tell everyone that I felt confident I had it. And last day in the office was this day, and I don't remember who I saw, but you'll remember. And I tried to spread the word as best I could. But no, I think I caught it so early. Everything was new. No one knew anything. I don't know how much they've really learned thus far. They can't tell me how long I'm going to be invincible. Will I be, immune through the fall or for the rest of my life? They don't know. So,
right,
um,
right.
anyway.
Do you think do you have any sense at all of where you might have picked it up? I mean, just
If you haven't been to New York during the middle of the week, at certain hours, I mean, it is shoulder to
yeah,
shoulder walking. I ran into more people just crossing streets and walking down sidewalks, and you're crammed into elevators. I could have caught it anywhere. It could have been at the airport. So I know that several people from New York that caught it on or about the same time. It was spreading so fast in New York, so I'm pretty confident that's where I got it. It didn't
right,
show up in Dallas for weeks after that, and I might have brought it, but I don't think so. Um, yeah,
right.
someone else can take the credit for that. So
Yeah, I have an oldest. My oldest son actually lives in New York, and when it first started, he and his girlfriend actually moved to Michigan to get away. And their county was like the second most infected county in the U.S. Um,
yeah, it's funny
there,
you say that. A lot of people I work with, they had a lake house or something upstate or out of the city, right?
right,
And if they didn't live out of the city already and commute in and out, which a lot of them did, they had a lake house or something, and they left.
right,
One of our neighbors here, their daughter worked in New York, and she caught it. She brought it home. She went into isolation as soon as she got home, as did my daughter from DC when she came home for 2 weeks. She went into isolation, but she was confirmed positive, and
your
she
your
had none
daughter
of the
was.
symptoms. My daughter was in DC. She didn't catch it, but she isolated for 2 weeks. So
Oh, okay,
everyone that we've brought into contact with our family that stayed with us, my daughter, we've isolated them from the rest of the family so they didn't bring it in.
but
My daughter, who,
you're the only one who was actually confirmed positive in your family.
yes, interestingly enough. Now, my daughter, the ICU nurse, she works every few nights. She works all night, 3 or 4 nights in a row, and then she gets 3 or 4 days off. She's in contact with COVID ICU nurses, and we have a protocol with her. She comes in through the garage, takes all her clothes off, everything in the wash, and we leave a towel for her. She goes directly to disinfect herself, shower, and sleep through the day until she does her night shift. But so we're following a pretty tight protocol. Only recently in our neighborhood have we had backyard gatherings at 6 feet. We do that. I'm sure most of you are doing that, right? So you bring your own cocktails. You don't touch anything they have, and one of the questions I got, I guess, from you, Sheila, maybe from someone else, but how long? I don't know how long we're going to do this. I think we're all kind of figuring this out. I'm bored as heck without any sports. I have tickets for some college football this fall. I'd like to go see the games. But I think you look at what's going on in Brazil right now, despite their aspirations, the reality is it's spreading and the death rates are climbing up to the several thousands a day. That's not a good thing, I don't think. Could they die from something else? Yeah, maybe. But this clearly is accelerating that or making it happen in a different way. But other questions?
My daughter's going to play college hockey, and what the NCAA is telling them is it looks like they will have hockey season with no fans. So it'll be just games with no fans, but that's kind of what they're going with right now. But who knows?
I don't know.
Situation on the ground could change.
Midwest. Yeah, it could. I'm from the Midwest, went to University of Iowa, so I'm a Big Ten guy, and I've been watching the various schools. Michigan and so on came out and said they weren't going to do football if the kids didn't come back to school, if they weren't in the stands. So I don't know. That's a very controversial topic right now. So we'll all be anxious to see, I'm sure. Other questions from anyone? So I'll tell you one thing. What this has allowed me to do is relating this to my work, right? So we sell a endpoint security, cybersecurity product that prevents a successful detonation of a virus, right? On your workstation or your server, anyone trying to take information off your server or steal credentials, we block that. So the analogy or metaphor I use is I very much would have appreciated something that would have blocked this virus, right? Like our product, rather than having to detect it and try and mitigate it afterwards, because it was a horrible couple weeks. So,
what do we call that? Being left of boom, right?
Yeah, the breach of the dwell time and all of the expense or the pain and agony, it's not worth it. You might as well spend the money on prevention, right?
Have you
prevention
seen
without detection? That's right.
Right. Have you seen any like the whole work from home thing? Has that changed? And I build this as being not so salesy. So I guess just from a practical perspective, have you seen changes in what people are asking you guys for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So everyone's using different collaboration tools, and everyone has experienced some sort of Zoom bombing or this and that, and it's raised a level of sensitivity to security of endpoints, devices. The other thing, there's been a lot of cyber attacks on healthcare facilities, hospitals, research centers. We have a partner like NetVPro in Chicago, and their niche they're focused on with several companies, IBM, not the least of which, is to focus on providing managed security services and solutions, if you will, for the healthcare community. Some of their first customers are hospitals in Chicago, Ohio State University. So there is a much higher degree of sensitivity to protecting medical records of folks today than there was 6 months ago. So other questions? Well, I'm curious if you have any insight into how to connect and communicate, especially extended family. Good question. So there are, and it's interesting, years ago, I worked for British Telecom, I worked for Siemens Enterprise, and we sold collaboration tools, and we sold them all, right? Some from the very best high-end Cisco full immersion video rooms where you had half a table and you sat down and it looked like the person was literally right across the same table from you. In fact, I used to go to Minneapolis a lot. Target, their headquarters is up there, and their manufacturing executives from Asia would connect with their CEO. Fantastic tool. And then there's all the other tools in between. I would say, there are advantages and disadvantages to many of them. Microsoft Teams is a good one. I think my wife uses with her family the Apple, what is it, house party or whatever, that seems to be good for the Apple community. If you're using it in a business environment, a tool like Circuit that we used to sell from Siemens Enterprise, I think it's sold now by Ring Central, or what's the other one that's out there? It's a tool that allows you to put files into a web collaboration conversation. You share the file, and the file stays with this thread. So if we kept this thread alive, anyone could go back to this thread. It's like an email, and there would be files attached to it, like in a file drawer, and every one of these conversations would be stored, the video of that, in that thread as well. So Slack has that capability. So that's a great collaboration tool as well. They were a big competitor of ours when I was selling Circuit. But I think this will change the way we do business going forward. Companies are figuring out they can get things done without as much travel, without as much entertainment. So T&E budgets will go down. And I think people will be less reticent to get into large meetings or gatherings for some time, at least until we get the vaccination. So I think it's going to have a 6-9 month impact on us until people really start to travel and make it like it was before. It may never get back to the way it was. Other questions from anyone? Okay, I got one for all of you. How many of you out there know someone that has had COVID? Anyone raise your hand? Anyone know anyone that? All right. Brian? Okay. Michael? All right. Couple people. Were they close family or friends, or just distant family and friends?
I guess kind of a distant family friend. Actually, I work for a company. It's not a competitor of yours, but I work for Baronis, and we're based in New York City. So a lot of my coworkers actually were affected. And you say that because it's funny because everybody's remote, right? So our office has been closed since the beginning of March, and everybody's scattered, right? They moved to Vermont or upstate New York or what have you. But yeah, I've actually got it would be my sister's sister-in-law. She's a nurse at HCMC, which is a pretty big regional healthcare facility down in Minneapolis, and she was directly affected for sure. So,
so the follow-up question, Michael asked you the same thing. So, how did that affect the way you conducted yourself, and the way you distanced or protected yourself after that? Did that change your behavior at all?
Well, for me, it's funny you say that because it's like my wife and I were just talking, and I have 3 kids at home, so they've been doing the distance learning. Today is like a big celebration because it's like the last day of distance learning at our house, which has been a big deal. But things like, even like my wife was saying, like grocery shopping, right? We have a big grocery store chain here. Colburn's is our big deal where we live. And my wife and I have been she's been doing all of her shopping online, right? So we just drive up to the store, they run it out to your car and they dump it in, and away you go, right? She says, I don't know if I'll ever go back.
It's so convenient, right?
It is.
Buy groceries. You can go to Best Buy. They'll bring it out to your car and put it in. And concierge service is pretty
So
nice.
it is,
Yeah.
it's kind of the white glove service, you know, she sits down, plops down with a laptop and says, I need this and this and this. And it just, you know, yeah, so I could see it's certainly changing the way. And she's had some medical appointments that all been telemedicine, right? I mean,
Yeah.
our family doctor, it's just been telemedicine. There's no going to the clinic,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
on COVID related even, just.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. Telemedicine. Well, the whole Canadian medical system changed a few years ago and moved to telemedicine because they had such a high mortality rate after surgeries. Patients would go back for a follow-up checkup and they'd catch pneumonia and they would die. So Canada is ahead of us in that regard. So it's interesting. I think telemedicine is here to stay. Michael, how about you? So who was caught the COVID near you?
Yeah, so I've got three friends. They're extended friends, acquaintances that all were positive. I do have it's kind of a distant uncle. He died in March. I didn't know him well, but he's a family member that older, I would say. I think he was in mid 70s, and he did pass away from this. And then the extended family, I have one that really, I don't think had to receive any treatment. And then the other two were in ICU for about 3 weeks. They did not have to go on a ventilator, but they were very close to that. They thought they were going to, and they just never had to go to a ventilator, which was good. And I think both are back home now, last I heard. But it was about a 3-week medical stay for both of them, husband and wife, out of Maple Lake. And so folks around here that are familiar, you know, it's pretty close as far as that goes. And then, you know, and I'll follow up the question that I was asking there, and I didn't ask it well, is as far as behavior, my wife and I, and we have 2 sons, pretty socially distant. I have one son who it was absolute torture to live that way. It just drove him crazy. He's very, very, very social. We made the choice to let him go and live with my sister. She has 3 boys that are similar age. He's 17, so I mean, he's not a young kid. He's been there for about 3 weeks now, and their social distance boundaries and mine are quite different. You know, so you talk about getting back in the backyard get-togethers and the 6-foot separations. I'm all for that, but I see my extended family, they're pretty much back to hugs and kisses and hanging out just like normal. And I really struggle with that because I don't want to reject them, but I have a different guideline. I'm just trying to follow the state guideline. And so I'm curious how to mix that. You know, that my wife and I have last night we're talking about is like, how do we do this? Because they're not participating.
I think certainly any preconditions either of you may have that I know my wife has, I forget what it's called, but she has some sort of medical disorder that makes her, you know, she has a precondition that
my wife has
her in a
asthma.
I think it's something.
Asthma, and so that would be true of her as well.
Yeah, so you'll have to make choices as you are to keep yourself protected, which means you won't see. And we have people in our neighborhood that have made that same kind of choice for the same reason. And you know, I hear neighbors giving them a hard time. I'm like, hey, you know, you only got one life. So,
Michael, it's interesting. We, our family recently this last weekend, and I talked to Chuck about this a little bit yesterday, had an occasion to travel to Detroit. My oldest son got engaged, so we traveled to Detroit for that. We stopped for gas in a neighboring state that might have a lot to do with cheese.
The one between here and there.
Yeah, the one between, and frankly, nobody was wearing masks. We had our masks on. Nobody was wearing masks. We actually took some heat in a couple places, which was surprising to me. But then when we crossed the border into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, everybody was wearing masks. It was really interesting to see the difference. And I mean, from our perspective, we still wore them. We suffered the slings and arrows of it, but I think you're right. There is a choice. I guess the other thing is that I have a daughter who was 18, just graduated from high school and wanted to hang out with her friends. And what we asked of her was, from a social distancing perspective, is that they meet in a parking lot and do car meetings. So that was for her, and every person is different. For her, that was an acceptable compromise, so she could see her friends and they could go get their coffee, or, well, I call it a dessert in a cup. But anyway, they could do that and still at least socialize. But people it's isolating, and it's an interesting thing. And it seems to be a very, it's kind of like I talk about laptop screens, right? Everybody has a different desire for that, right? And it's very personal choice in a lot of cases. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've even, like, my mother. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Chuck.
No, all I was going to say is everybody has to make a living, and you got to weigh out all that, and it's tough trade-offs. So I have empathy, sympathy for both. People should know what kind of risk they're taking and make the best right choice for them and their family, I guess, right?
Well, I think, Chuck, one of the reasons I was so compelled to have you engaged today is, unfortunately, it's become almost a political discussion, and I wanted to have somebody who had experienced it to bring the realness of it forward. You don't necessarily need to have a "Don't Tread on Me" logo tattooed on your arm to believe, what's happening, and that these things are real, and that you experienced a real thing. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to have. I was just very interested in your story to put a human face on this thing that we see in the news, and you hear, and if you read things that are, both ways. This is the worst thing in the world, to it's nothing. And I just felt it was very, very good, and I really appreciate your willingness to talk about it and share your personal experience. I'm assuming you're not an agent of the U.S. government or China trying to propagandize us one way or another. You're just kind of telling us what really happened, right?
I don't even own stock in Gilead or whoever the company is that's making a vaccine, or hopefully making a vaccine. No,
I figured,
just feel obliged to step up and pay it forward. So thank you.
I truly appreciate your willingness to talk. Does anybody else have any other questions for Chuck?
Oh, certainly insightful. Thank you, Chuck, for sharing.
Yes, really delighted to do it. I thank you, NetView Pro, for having me, and for all of you to join. If you have any other questions that occur to you later, feel free on LinkedIn or whatever to or send me an email, and I'd be delighted to talk to you. So I really believe in speaking up. So,
and if anybody has any want to learn about AppGuard, I will put in a plug.